War. War never changes.
Some kind of war junkie?
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Welcome to the War 102 podcast, where we explore the doctrine, theory, philosophy, and history of warfare. I'm your guide, Paul Darling, and I want to share what I learned in nearly 30 years in uniform. So let's get to learning about the most influential activity in human history, war. Welcome to episode 67, The Rise of Islam. The initial intent was to discuss the Battle of Tours, when Charles the Hammer Martel stopped the Saracens of Abd al-Rahman from destroying Christendom and spreading Islam beyond the Iberian Peninsula and into the heart of Europe. But to understand the criticality of this battle, an understanding of the birth and amazingly rapid spread of Islam is critical. So we have to start there. And in the greater sense, a better understanding of the history of Islam still proves critical to understanding events today. In no possible way could 15 minutes, hours, days, or months possibly provide the kind of education necessary into the vastly complex early history of the caliphs. Indeed, so much of these tales are myth, told and retold by various parties, each with different bones to pick or narratives to establish. Nothing written of the period exists, and no contemporary third-party accounts support the rise of Islam, or even the existence of Muhammad. Detailed accounts of the various battles are likewise absent, focusing almost entirely on the key leaders with but scant attention focused on the tactics or strategy. Which is a shame, because the unquestioned fact is that in 100 years, this obscure group of Arabs emanating from a trading town in Arabia went on to conquer a huge tract of land along the Tropic of Cancer. The impact of Islam is incalculable to both history and the modern world. So within this discussion, I will speak only in generalities and quite frankly with the intent to provide a basic instruction in understanding the first century of Islam, mostly to provide context to the importance of the Battle of Tours, which I hope to discuss next week. Most are familiar with Muhammad and the establishment of Islam. As noted earlier, nothing contemporary was written about the man, so everything we know came after his death. This is in contrast to Jesus, where contemporary accounts of non-Christians exist and recorded the existence of Jesus of Nazareth. The historical fact of Jesus is largely unquestioned. This is not to say the existence of Muhammad is questioned. Rather, what we know is entirely from Islamic sources, and thus has to be a little bit questionable. So, enough about that. Following his death, the reign of the caliphs began. Caliph itself means literally successors. The first caliphate is known as the Rashidun Caliphate. Upon the death of Muhammad in 632, there was no clear successor as Muhammad had no living male children. The companions of Muhammad held a shura, meaning consultation, any word still used regularly in the Islamic world today, and selected Abu Bakr, his father-in-law and close confidant, who continued the conquest of Arabia. Abu Bakr himself died only 2 years later, uniquely among the Rashidun caliphs of natural causes, which allowed him to anoint his successor, Umar. In his 10 years of reign, the caliphate spread exponentially, conquering almost 3/4 of the Byzantine Empire and essentially the entire Sassanian Empire, then ruling Iran, from the Hindu Kush to the Caucasus, and both coasts of the Persian Gulf. Umar, ironic in today's environment, lifted the Roman-era ban on Jews entering Jerusalem, allowing them to pray yet again at the ruins of the ancient temple, known today as the Western or Wailing Wall. This, in part, was the consolation prize for his expulsion of the remaining Jewish and Christian populations from Arabia. Umar established the still-held principle that Arabia was only for Muslims. Umar was assassinated by a Persian slave 10 years after becoming caliph. Umar is widely considered the most influential of all the caliphs. Uthman succeeded Umar, and he focused far more on administrative and social policies than military conquest. Quite frankly, he was not the general nor leader Umar was. Under Uthman, the oral traditions of the Quran were actually written down, creating the modern Quran, often called Uthman's Quran. Tragically, none of these Qurans still exist today. Militarily, he delegated near all authority to trusted subordinates who operated independently and further expanded the conquest started by the earlier caliphs. It was the reign of Uthman which created the first cracks in Muslim unity, as he proved to be lenient and arbitrary, which allowed strong-willed, though politically weaker leaders to think revolt over the now overspread Islamic kingdom, still ruled by the relatively small Mecca elite who comprised this early leadership. As such rebellions flared up across the early empire, a group of rebels raided Uthman's home, murdering him. Due to the circumstances, there was chaos, and his entry into the Muslim cemetery was denied, and ironically, he ended up being buried in a Jewish cemetery. The assassination of Uthman caused his clan, the Umayyads, to flee Mecca, and Ali, cousin and son-in-law of Muhammad, assumed the leadership of the Ummah, and thus the first fractures in Islam were widened into the cracks that still exist today, as Ali was obviously the first Shia caliph. While Ali reportedly had no direct association with the assassination of Uthman, he was widely seen as sympathetic to the rebels. Under Ali's leadership, some questioned his magnanimous attitude towards those he vanquished, leading to the rise of the Kharijites, or seceders, who then challenged Ali and his armies. In this, they relied on the Quran and the oral traditions, which gave them rights to slave and booty, which Ali was challenging, their literalist slogan being, "No judgment but God." Whereas Ali felt that the caliph, by nature of his position, had right to interpret as he saw fit. In this, Ali crushed the Kharijites at the Battle of Narwan, the first large-scale battle between two Muslim armies, which led to the first fitna, or civil war, in the Ummah. While the Kharijites were crushed, Muawiyah, who had done much of the conquering during Uthman's reign and had power outside of Arabia, and withheld open allegiance to Ali. Muawiyah continued the fitna after the defeat of the Kharijites. Ali first defeated other dissidents at the Battle of Kamal Basra. Muawiyah, holding Syria and the Levant, made allegiance with the Byzantine Empire to focus on Ali. The war was raging across Arabia, Syria, and Iraq until a Kharijite assassinated Ali in 661. His oldest son Hassan succeeded him but for a few months, and then abdicated following an assassination attempt and mass desertions of his army to Muawiyah. There's much debate even today with whether the actions of Muawiyah were treasonous, with the Shia naturally saying yes, and Sunni hand-waving it away with platitudes that the companions of Muhammad, of which Muawiyah was one, are inherently blameless. Regardless, the abdication of Hassan and his replacement by Muawiyah ended the first caliphate and led to the rise of the Umayyad Caliphate. This also transferred the caliphate from Mecca to Damascus, as the Umayyads' clan's power base was now found in Syria. So what kind of army conquered eastern North Africa, Iran, the Arabian Peninsula, Syria, the Levant? We actually don't know much. Written records are effectively non-existent. There are nearly no remaining drawings nor archaeological evidence. Due to the vast distances of the empire and scant populations, particularly in Arabia, light cavalry provided the bulk of the fighting power, augmented by poorly trained and equipped infantry for larger battles. Aside from Umar, decentralized control with but loose instructions were the norm, this loose control being one of the primary reasons for the collapse of the Rashidun Caliphate. In combat, the light infantry mixed with archers was designed to fix the enemy in place, while the cavalry would try to find weak points in the flanks and rear. Naval forces were used as well, but largely manned by mercenaries from more coastal, non-Arab communities. By the time Muawiyah seized control of the caliphate, the Arabs had conquered the sparsely populated eastern part of North Africa through Libya. Muawiyah focused on consolidating power and uniting the caliphate. His efforts were not helped by appointing his son Yazid as successor in 676, who then assumed the throne upon his father's death in 680. The whole legitimacy of the Umayyad dynasty was based upon the selection of the caliph by shura, not by lineage. Realizing this, Muhammad's grandson, Hussein ibn Ali, raised an army and challenged Yazid's rule at the Battle of Karbala. Here, Hussein and most of his followers were killed in a lopsided battle. This battle, more than the assassination of Ali, has shaped the modern Shia community and their sense of betrayal and grievance. Indeed, it is Hussein who is revered even more than his father, Ali. This battle marks the beginning of the second fitna, when Abd Allah ibn al-Zubayr took up Ali's cause. Al-Zubayr took up a defensive posture in Mecca, where the Umayyad forces besieged him in 683, but Yazid died that same year, and the Syrians abandoned the siege to return to Damascus, awaiting the new caliph. Al-Zubayr quickly proclaimed himself caliph, but Yazid's son, Muawiyah II, despite being quite ill, also took the throne, but he died the next year. It appeared at this point that the Ali wing would win the second fitna, as several powerful tribes throughout the caliphate pledged their support to al-Zubayr. a shura of Umayyad leaders was convened and selected Marwan as the fourth Umayyad caliph. And he too ruled less than a year, but he established the first of the Marwanid rulers. After his death, his son, Abd al-Malik, ruled for the next 20 years. The first half was spent fighting the second fitna. Learning from previous mistakes, he slowly consolidated power by appointing Arabs living in Syria as key governors and commanders as he retook power. Al-Zubair eventually fell in battle outside Mecca in 692, and while his supporters continued a guerrilla war in Iraq, they eventually were defeated and Umayyad control across the Muslim world solidified by 699. So this is a whole bunch of history, and we haven't even gotten close to the Battle of Tours. So what is the takeaways for background? When unified, the Arab conquests were remarkably swift and then froze in place as civil wars raged. By 700, the Umayyad Caliphate had established control and was ready to restart the Jihad. During the chaos of the Second Fitna, the Byzantines and Berbers had retaken much of North Africa. But in 703, the reportedly Jewish queen of the Berbers, Diya, was killed at the Battle of Tabarka in modern-day Tunisia. Carthage, which had been retaken by the Byzantines during the chaos, was recaptured and destroyed yet again by the Arab forces, with the men all killed and women and children enslaved. Overall, the estimates of total slaves taken during this reconquest of North Africa was from 30,000 to 300,000. It took centuries for the complete Arabization of the Maghreb, with the last of the Christian communities disappearing in the 14th century. As an aside, the Coptic Christians survived Islamization in Egypt, arguably due to their monastic orders literally keeping the faith, whereas no such monks existed farther to the west. In 711, Tariq ibn Zayed led 7,000 Berber cavalrymen in crossing the Straits of Gibraltar and then defeating the Visigoth king Roderick at the Battle of Guadalete in July of that year. And in only 7 years, he quickly conquered nearly all of the Iberian Peninsula, known in Islam as Al-Andalus, a derivative of the Spanish word for Vandals, Vandalos. Roderick was an unpopular king, both with his fellow Vandal dukes as well as the non-Christian populations, notably the Jews. In fact, Ziad was aided by Jews who joined his forces in conquering several Spanish towns, as well as an additional influx of 12,000 Arab soldiers sent by the governor of Africa, Musa ibn Nusayr. Those Visigoths who submitted to the Arab conquest were allowed to retain their lands while paying tribute, while those who did not fled to the northwest of Iberia, establishing the kingdom of Asturias along the northern coast of the Cantabrian Sea in the Bay of Biscay, from which they maintained a Christian enclave and the base of Reconquista, which would eventually retake all of Spain in 1492. The key point to this narrative is that from 630, when Muhammad attacked Mecca, to roughly 720, Islam spread to its western peak. Discounting those years of civil war, in only decades, they took over the bulk of the Byzantine Empire and defeated the Visigoths. Their rise was meteoric and seemingly unstoppable. It is within this context that the criticality of the Battle of Tours must be understood. This was no slow encroachment with a battle ending basically a culminating point of a Muslim conquest. Rather, this was a defeat of what appeared to be an unstoppable army. And with that, we'll discuss the actual Battle of Tours and more about the Franks and Charles the Hammer next week. Thanks for listening today. If you want to help the show, please share today's episode on any social media sites you can. Check out the War 102 Buzzsprout website for more information and to send me a message. And, of course, my thanks to the subscribers who help keep the show going. Hope you all join me next week. See you soon.